The Exilari Empire had ruled the stars for thousands of years. Their ships were massive, their weapons unmatched, their enemies crushed before they could even think of resistance. To the Exilari, they were gods, and the galaxy was their domain. No species had ever dared to challenge their rule. From their golden throne world, the High Emperor of the Exilari watched over his empire with pride. His fleet stretched across countless systems, enforcing his will with iron discipline. When a planet refused to submit, it was burned to ash. When a species showed signs of rebellion, it was wiped from history. Fear kept the galaxy in order. One day, the Exilari scanners detected an unknown warship near the edge of their empire. It was small compared to the mighty dreadnoughts of the Exilari, but it did not retreat. It simply hovered there, silent, as if it did not know the power it was facing. The Exilari commanders laughed at the sight. A single ship, in Exilari territory. It was foolish. A message was sent to the strange vessel. The Exilari commander's voice was filled with amusement and arrogance. You are in the territory of the Exilari Empire. Surrender now, and your species will be spared. Resist, and you will be destroyed. No response. The commander frowned. He sent the message again, this time with a direct warning. The ship did not reply. It remained in place, like a ghost, refusing to acknowledge the presence of the Exilari fleet. Annoyed, the commander ordered a warning shot. A blast of plasma fired from the Exilari dreadnought, tearing through space at impossible speed. The energy beam should have vaporized the tiny vessel instantly. But it didn't. The human warship moved. Not in the way normal ships moved. It did not dodge. It did not accelerate away. It simply vanished from where it was and reappeared elsewhere, as if space itself had bent around it. The Exilari officers on the command deck stared in stunned silence. Then the human ship fired back. A single shot, almost invisible, like a beam of light cutting through the darkness. It was not large, not flashy, not something that should have been dangerous. And yet, when it hit the Exilari dreadnought, something happened that no one expected. The Exilari dreadnought, the pride of the fleet, exploded. Not damaged, not crippled. It ceased to exist in the blink of an eye. Where there was once a mighty warship, there was now nothing but floating debris. The bridge of the command ship fell into absolute silence. The Exilari had never seen anything like this before. No enemy had ever destroyed one of their dreadnoughts so effortlessly. Panic rippled through the fleet. The human warship remained in place, as if waiting. The Exilari commander, his confidence shattered, ordered his remaining ships to fire everything they had. Missiles, plasma beams, energy lances, all of it streaked toward the human warship, enough firepower to annihilate a planet. But just like before, the ship moved in ways that should have been impossible. Every shot missed. Every missile failed to lock on. Every attack was wasted. And then the human ship fired again. Another Exilari warship vanished into nothingness. Then another. Then another. The Exilari fleet, once mighty and unstoppable, was being erased before their own eyes. A message appeared on their screens. A human voice, calm, cold, and filled with purpose. This is not your galaxy anymore. And then, the human warship vanished. For the first time in their long history, the Exilari felt something they had never known. Fear. The Exilari Empire had never known defeat. Their warships had burned countless worlds, their armies had crushed entire civilizations, and their name was spoken with reverence and terror. Yet now, something impossible had happened. A single unknown warship had erased their strongest dreadnought from existence. It had moved like a ghost, dodged every attack without effort, and then disappeared as if it had never been there. The Exilari High Council gathered in the Grand War Chamber, a massive circular hall where the greatest military minds of the Empire stood in silent disbelief. The destruction of one ship was not enough to shake the foundation of the Empire, but this was different. The enemy had not just won a battle, they had demonstrated something terrifying. Power beyond understanding. technology beyond reason. A high emperor, draped in his ceremonial war robes, sat upon his throne, his golden eyes burning with anger. He was the ruler of 1,000 systems, the unchallenged sovereign of the stars. He would not allow this insult to go unanswered. "Send the second fleet," he commanded, his voice sharp as a blade. The second fleet was not just any fleet. It was a planet-killer force made up of 50 warships, including 5 dreadnoughts, each capable of leveling an entire world. It was the hammer of the Empire, the force that had silenced rebellions and ended civilizations. There was no enemy in history that had stood against it. The fleet moved swiftly, warping through space toward the coordinates of the last encounter. They expected to find wreckage, perhaps survivors. They expected the human ship to have fled. What they found instead made their blood run cold. The human warship was still there, waiting. Admiral Xorel, a veteran of countless battles, stood at the command bridge of the Xelari flagship. He had conquered 10 worlds in his lifetime, wiped out millions, and had never once known fear. But now, staring at the single dark vessel in the distance, he felt something he could not understand. Dread. "Surround it," he ordered, his voice steady. His crew obeyed instantly, moving the warships into a formation that no enemy had ever escaped. The ship was trapped, nowhere to run. "This is Admiral Xorel of the Xelari Empire," he announced, his voice echoing across the fleet's communication channels. "You are surrounded. Surrender now, and your species will be spared." No response. Fire. 50 warships unleashed their full power. Plasma beams, torpedoes, and energy cannons all converged on the lone ship. A storm of destruction that should have reduced it to dust in an instant. But the human ship did not move. It did not evade. It let the attacks hit. And nothing happened. The Xelari watched in horror as their weapons, the same weapons that had wiped out entire planets, had no effect. It was impossible. No shield was that strong. No armor was that advanced. Nothing was invincible. And yet, the human warship floated there, untouched. A message appeared on every Xelari screen, burning itself into their systems as if the ship had forced its way into their computers. The same calm voice as before spoke again. "You misunderstand. We are not trapped here with you. You are trapped here with us." The ship moved, not forward, not backward. It simply disappeared and reappeared in the middle of the Xelari fleet. Then it began the slaughter. A single beam of light lanced out from the human vessel, striking the nearest Xelari warship. The massive dreadnought, 3 miles long, vanished in an instant. No explosion, no debris, just gone. Panic erupted across the Xelari fleet. "All ships, retreat." Admiral Xorel shouted, his voice no longer carrying the authority of an empire, but the desperation of a doomed man. It didn't matter. The human warship moved faster than anything should be able to move. It flickered across the battlefield, destroying warship after warship with cold efficiency. There was no wasted energy, no excessive attacks, just precise, surgical elimination. Admiral Xorel stood frozen, watching his proud fleet, the fleet that had crushed countless civilizations, be erased, not destroyed, erased. His flagship was the last one left. His crew begged him to flee, to surrender, to do anything to survive. But then the human ship appeared in front of him. It did not fire. Instead, the Admiral's screen lit up with one final message. "Run. Tell your empire what you saw. Tell them the Xelari are no longer gods. Tell them humanity has arrived." And then the human warship was gone. The Xelari Admiral, the once mighty conqueror, sat in silence, staring at the wreckage of his fleet. For the first time in the history of the Xelari Empire, they had encountered something greater than themselves. The Xelari homeworld stood in eerie silence. The usual hum of city life, the towering spires of golden temples, the massive halls of power, everything was shrouded in a heavy, unnatural stillness. Across the Empire, billions of Silari awaited news. The Second Fleet had been sent to crush the humans, to wipe away the insult of their defiance. Victory was all but guaranteed. It always had been. But now there was no word, no triumphant announcement, no report of an enemy crushed beneath the weight of Silari might. Then a signal finally came. The lone surviving warship of the Second Fleet limped into the home system, its hull shattered, its engines flickering, its weapons dead. The Silari watched in horror. The fleet was gone. The impossible had happened. Their greatest force had been annihilated, leaving behind nothing but silence and a single broken survivor. Admiral Xorel, once a legend of war, now stood before the High Council, his body trembling. His robes, once pristine, were torn and burned from battle. His golden eyes, once sharp and filled with arrogance, now held only the haunted look of a man who had seen something beyond understanding. "The humans, they are not what we thought," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. The High Emperor, his face carved from cold stone, narrowed his gaze. "Explain," he commanded. The words felt heavy in the Admiral's throat. He was a warrior, a conqueror, a ruler of worlds. And yet he now struggled to speak. The Second Fleet did not engage in battle, he admitted. It was not a fight. It was annihilation. We did not lose. We ceased to exist. The council chamber erupted into murmurs of disbelief. The thought was unthinkable. The Silari had been the masters of the galaxy for millennia. They had burned civilizations into dust, enslaved entire species, and turned the stars themselves into weapons. And yet now, a single human warship had undone them in mere moments. "Enough," the High Emperor said, his voice cutting through the murmurs like a blade. "We are the Silari. We do not cower. We do not run. If these humans wish for war, we will show them what true gods are capable of." A signal alert interrupted him. A new transmission was being received, one that did not come from any Silari source. It came from Earth. The High Emperor gestured for the message to be played. The massive screen in the war chamber flickered, and a human appeared. The figure was calm, composed, and wore a uniform of deep black, with the insignia of Earth's military. His eyes held no fear, no hesitation. "I am General Elias Ward of the Terran Defense Fleet," the human said, his voice carrying across the vast chamber like a force of nature. "Your empire has made a grave mistake." The Silari Council bristled. No species had ever dared to speak to them with such defiance. But the human continued without care. "For centuries, you have ruled by fear," he said. "You have crushed civilizations beneath your heel. You have called yourselves gods." He leaned forward, his gaze piercing through the screen as if he were looking directly into the soul of every Silari present. "But you are not gods." The room tensed. No one had ever spoken such words to the Silari. No one had ever dared. "You have mistaken our silence for weakness," General Ward continued. "You believed us to be primitive because we did not expand like you did, because we did not seek conquest. But we were never weak. We were watching. We were preparing. And now it is your time that is ending." The High Emperor's fists clenched. "You dare threaten the Silari Empire," he growled. "You have destroyed a handful of ships. Do you think that means you have won? We will send our full might upon you, and your world will burn." General Ward did not blink. "You are welcome to try it," he said, "but it will be the last thing you ever do." The transmission ended. For a moment, there was silence. Then the High Emperor rose to his feet, his golden cloak billowing behind him. "Assemble the Grand Armada," he declared. "Every warship, every soldier, every weapon at our disposal." The Silari warriors stood, roaring in agreement. Their pride demanded vengeance. Their honor demanded blood. But in the deep corners of their minds, a new and unfamiliar thought had taken root. Doubt. The Grand Armada of the Silari Empire moved through space like a storm of fire and steel. Thousands of warships, from towering dreadnoughts to nimble strike cruisers, spread across the void in perfect formation. The fleet had never been assembled in such numbers before. This was not just a battle. It was a reckoning, a punishment for the insult humanity had dared to deliver. Admiral Kelzor stood on the bridge of the Eternal Dominion, the largest and most powerful warship ever built by the Xilari. Its hull was forged from the strongest metals in the galaxy, its weapons capable of cracking moons in half. He had personally overseen the destruction of 20 civilizations. He had led campaigns that had turned once thriving worlds into barren wastelands. He was the instrument of the Empire's wrath. The target was clear: Earth. The Terran homeworld was unlike anything the Xilari had conquered before. Its location had been hidden for centuries, its people unknown until now. That secrecy had allowed them to grow in the shadows, to develop weapons beyond understanding. But none of it mattered. The Grand Armada would wipe them from existence. As the fleet prepared to enter warp, the Admiral's sensors detected something strange. A single Terran warship appearing ahead of them. Kelzor narrowed his eyes. It was the same vessel that had destroyed the Second Fleet. This ship, alone, had challenged the Xilari Empire. And here it was again, standing in the path of thousands. Foolish, Kelzor muttered. He turned to his officers. Open a channel. I want to hear this human's last words. The screen flickered to life, and once again, the face of General Elias Ward appeared. His expression was unreadable, his eyes calm. Admiral Kelzor, he said, his voice steady. You are making a mistake. Kelzor laughed. A mistake. The only mistake was allowing your species to think you were anything more than insects. I see you still cling to your arrogance, even in the face of extinction. Ward did not react. He simply studied the Admiral for a moment before speaking. You misunderstand the situation, he said. I am not here to stop you. I am here to give you a choice. Kelzor's amusement faded. A choice? Ward nodded. Turn back now, and your empire will survive. Continue forward, and the Xilari will cease to exist. The Admiral's fists tightened. You think your single warship is enough to stop the might of the Xilari Grand Armada? No, Ward said. This warship is not here to fight. Kelzor sneered. Then why are you here? Ward leaned forward slightly. To show you what happens next. The transmission cut. And then, without warning, the human ship moved. It did not fire. It did not attack. It simply vanished, and in the next instant, appeared in the middle of the Grand Armada. Before the Xilari could react, a pulse of energy erupted from the human vessel. It spread outward in a perfect sphere, washing over every Xilari warship in the fleet. And then the impossible happened. The systems on every Xilari ship shut down instantly. Engines went cold. Shields collapsed. Weapons became useless. The mighty Grand Armada, thousands of ships, the greatest force in the galaxy, was dead in space. Panic erupted across the fleet. Kelzor slammed his fists on the console. What is happening? His officers frantically worked the controls. Admiral, our power cores are. They are gone. Not damaged, not disabled, gone. We are adrift. Kelzor's breath caught in his throat. This was no simple attack. This was something deeper, something more terrifying. The humans had just erased their ability to fight. The sensors flickered weakly, showing only one thing. The Terran warship, still drifting among them, unharmed, untouched. And then another message appeared on the screens, short and final. This was your only warning. And then, just as suddenly as it had arrived, the human warship vanished into nothingness. Kelzor stood frozen, his mind racing. The Xilari had always been the masters of war, the unstoppable force, the rulers of the stars. But now, for the first time in their existence, they have been conquered without a single shot being fired. Panic spread like wildfire across the Xilari Grand Armada. Thousands of warships floated helplessly in the void, their engines silent. their weapons useless. The power cores, the very heart of their technology, had not just been disabled. They had vanished. Admiral Kelzor gritted his teeth, his claws digging into the armrests of his command throne. His mind struggled to comprehend what had just happened. This was not warfare as he knew it. This was something else. Something worse. "Status report," he barked. His officers worked frantically, their normally disciplined composure slipping into barely controlled terror. "Admiral, we have no propulsion, no shields, no weapons. Every system is completely dead. We are stranded." Kelzor's golden eyes burned with rage. This was impossible. No empire in history had ever possessed technology that could disable an entire armada in an instant. And yet, the humans had done it without even firing a weapon. "Restore power. Find out what they did." We can't," an officer stammered. "The cores aren't damaged. They are just gone. It's as if they were never there." Kelzor's claws clenched so tightly, the metal of his throne groaned under the pressure. He refused to believe it. The Xilari were the gods of war. They did not suffer humiliation. The communications console flickered. A new message. From the humans. With a growl, the Admiral slammed his fist on the console, opening the transmission. The screen lit up, and once again, General Elias Ward's face appeared. "Admiral," Ward said, his expression unreadable. "You have now seen what we are capable of." Kelzor bared his fangs. "What trick is this?" "No trick," Ward said, "just reality." He leaned forward. "You call yourselves gods. You believe yourselves to be invincible. But today, you have learned the truth." Kelzor's fury boiled over. "We are the Xilari. We have ruled for 10,000 years. We have crushed civilizations before your kind even left your homeworld. You cannot possibly think you can defeat us." Ward's expression did not change. "We already have." The word struck like a physical blow. Kelzor felt his breath hitch. "You are stranded," Ward continued. "Powerless. Your mighty fleet, your grand armada, is nothing more than floating scrap metal. You are at our mercy." Kelzor's claws trembled. His mind screamed for a response, for a way to turn this moment into victory, but there was none. The truth was undeniable. The Xilari had lost without a battle. And then Ward delivered the final blow. "We did not destroy you," he said. "We could have. Easily. But we wanted you to understand." Kelzor narrowed his eyes. "Understand what?" Ward's voice was calm, yet it carried the weight of something far greater than simple words. "That the age of the Xilari is over." The silence that followed was suffocating. Ward continued, his voice like cold steel. "You have spent centuries believing you were the apex of the galaxy. That nothing could challenge you. That your rule was eternal." He leaned in closer, his gaze drilling into Kelzor's very soul. "But you were wrong. There is always something greater." The Xilari Admiral felt something he had never known before. Abyssal, paralyzing fear. Ward straightened. "Now I will give you a message to deliver to your Emperor." Kelzor remained silent. "You will tell him that the Xilari have two choices. You can change, or you can disappear. Continue your conquest, and we will end you. Not just your fleets, not just your worlds. Your entire species." A shiver ran down Kelzor's spine. He believed him. Ward's gaze darkened. "Leave humanity alone. If you ever return to our space, we will not give you another warning." The screen went dark. For the first time in his life, Admiral Kelzor had no orders to give. His fleet drifted in silence, broken, not by fire, not by war, but by the knowledge that they were no longer the rulers of the stars. The Xilari Grand Armada remained frozen in the endless void, a silent graveyard of once mighty warships. No fires burned, no debris scattered, no wreckage drifted. There had been no battle, only defeat. Admiral Kelzor stood motionless on the command deck of the Eternal Dominion, his mind trapped between fury and horror. The transmission from the human general echoed in his head. "You will change, or you will disappear." Never, in all of Silari history, had such words been spoken to them. No species had dared. No species had survived long enough to even try. Yet here they were, defeated not by weapons, not by strength, but by something far worse, power beyond comprehension. An officer hesitated before speaking. "Admiral, what are your orders?" Kelzor's claws curled into a fist. What orders could he give? He had no fleet, no firepower, no way to strike back. Even if they managed to repair their systems, would it matter? The humans had done this effortlessly. The choice was clear, but he could not be the one to make it. "Send a transmission to the Emperor," Kelzor finally said, his voice tight with restrained fury. "Tell him, we must return." The bridge fell into silence. No one wanted to admit it. No one wanted to accept the truth, but it was undeniable. The Grand Armada, the most powerful force the Xilari had ever assembled, was retreating. It took time. The Xilari had to reactivate their ships manually, using backup systems designed for emergencies. But deep in their hearts, they all knew these systems existed for mechanical failures. Not for this. This was no ordinary defeat. This was humiliation. This was proof that the Xilari were no longer the apex predators of the stars. As the fleet turned and began its slow journey back to the Xilari homeworld, Kelzor stared into the void. The human warship had vanished, disappearing as if it had never existed. But Kelzor felt its presence. Somewhere, out there, the humans were watching, waiting. And if the Xilari made the wrong choice, they would not be given another chance. The Imperial Palace on Xilara Prime was a monument to power. The towering obsidian halls stretched toward the heavens, adorned with golden banners depicting the Empire's conquests. Statues of past emperors loomed over the capital city, their expressions carved with divine arrogance. But now, that arrogance had been shattered. The High Emperor, adorned in his ceremonial robes, sat on his throne of blackstone. His golden eyes flickered with barely contained rage as he listened to Kelzor's report. The council chamber was filled with the most powerful figures of the Empire. Generals, admirals, high priests. They had all gathered to hear of the fleet's glorious victory. Instead, they sat in stunned silence, unable to comprehend what they had just been told. When Kelzor finished, the silence stretched. No one spoke. No one could. Finally, the High Emperor leaned forward. His voice was dangerously soft. "You mean to tell me that our entire armada was defeated, without a single battle?" Kelzor swallowed hard. "Yes, my Emperor." A cold fury filled the Emperor's golden eyes. "You dare return to me in shame." The council tensed. Execution was inevitable. Kelzor knew it. He had seen it countless times before. Admirals who failed were cast aside, their names erased from history. But this time was different. This time, Kelzor was not afraid. "Kill me if you wish," Kelzor said, his voice steady. "But it will not change the truth. The humans have surpassed us. We are no longer the masters of the stars. If we do not change, we will be nothing more than a memory." A murmur ran through the chamber. Heresy. Treason. To suggest that the Xilari were not supreme. Unthinkable. And yet, the fear in Kelzor's eyes was real. The silence was broken by an aged voice. One of the high priests of the Xilari religion, his face marked with centuries of wisdom, spoke slowly. "The prophecy," he whispered. The council turned toward him. The Emperor's expression darkened. "Speak clearly, Old One." The priest met the Emperor's gaze. "For centuries, our scholars have studied the scriptures of our ancestors. There is a passage, long dismissed as superstition, but now I see it differently." The old priest's voice grew stronger. "And from the void shall rise a force unknown, unseen, unstoppable. The masters of war shall face their reckoning, and in that moment they shall learn the truth, that even gods must kneel before the storm. The chamber fell into a deeper silence. For the first time, the Xelari felt something alien, something unnatural, something they had never known before. Doubt, fear. The High Emperor's claws tapped against the armrest of his throne. His rage had not faded, but something else had taken its place. Recognition. The priest's words were prophecy or warning. And now, the Xelari stood at the edge of oblivion. The Emperor slowly rose to his feet. His golden cloak trailed behind him as he descended the steps of his throne. He stopped before Kelzor, studying him with cold eyes. "You are certain," the Emperor said. "The humans could have destroyed us." Kelzor met his gaze. Without effort, the Emperor exhaled. "Then we have but one path left to us." The council held its breath. Would he declare war? Would he send more fleets, risking extinction? The Emperor turned toward his advisors. His voice was calm, yet absolute. "We will make contact with the humans." The chamber erupted into chaos. The Xelari did not negotiate. They did not bow. They ruled, or they destroyed. Silence. The Emperor's voice cut through the outcry like a blade. "We will send an envoy," he continued, "not to surrender, not to beg." His golden eyes burned with something new, something dangerous. To understand. Kelzor felt his claws loosen. He had expected resistance. Instead, he saw the same thing he had felt in the void. Fear. The Xelari would not fall today. But the future of the Empire now rested on a single, terrifying truth. They were no longer the strongest. The Imperial flagship, Eternal Dominion, soared through the void, its once proud banners now a quiet shadow of the past. No longer a symbol of conquest, it now carried something that Xelari had never imagined: a diplomatic envoy. Admiral Kelzor stood at the bridge, staring at the view screen. His heart was heavy, his mind storming with unspoken thoughts. This was not how things were supposed to be. The Xelari were conquerors, rulers of the stars, divine in their own right. And yet, here they were, seeking an audience with the very species that had humbled them. For the first time in Xelari history, they were not feared. They were afraid. A soft chime rang through the bridge. "Admiral," the communications officer said, "the humans are responding." Kelzor straightened. On screen, the image flickered, and there he was, General Elias Ward, the human war leader, the man whose voice alone had shaken the Xelari Empire to its core. His expression was unreadable, but his eyes were sharp, calculating. "You actually came," Ward said, his voice even. Kelzor's jaw tightened. "The High Emperor has sent an envoy. We wish to speak." Ward studied him. "And what exactly do you wish to say?" The words were bitter, but Kelzor spoke them anyway. "The Xelari do not beg. We do not kneel, but we understand power when we see it." Ward remained silent. Kelzor took a breath. "The High Emperor wishes to open negotiations." A pause. Then Ward leaned forward. "Negotiations." Kelzor forced himself to meet the human's gaze. "We wish to understand what you are." Ward's expression did not change, but something in his eyes flickered. Interest. "And what does your emperor hope to gain from this understanding?" Kelzor hesitated. "We have ruled the stars for 10,000 years. We have crushed civilizations, wiped empires from history. But your kind is different. You are not like the others." Ward tilted his head slightly. "No, we're not." Kelzor exhaled slowly. "The Xelari cannot afford to be blind. If we do not adapt, we will not survive. The Emperor understands this. He wishes to know if there is a place for our people in this new era." Ward was quiet for a long moment. Then he spoke. "I'll arrange a meeting." The screen went dark. Kelzor let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. The hardest part was over. Or so he thought. The meeting was held on neutral ground, a space station at the edge of the Orion expanse. It was a cold, sterile place, neither auxiliary nor human in design. The perfect place for history to be rewritten. The High Emperor himself had come, surrounded by his royal guards, his golden robes flowing like liquid fire. Opposite him stood General Ward, flanked by a small delegation of human officials. There were no weapons, no threats, just two forces standing on the precipice of something unknown. The Emperor's voice was deep and regal. I have ruled for centuries. In that time, we have never encountered a species that could stand against us. Until now. Ward nodded but said nothing. The Emperor continued. Your power is beyond what we imagined. Your technology, your methods, they defy explanation. We were arrogant, and because of that, we were humbled. A murmur ran through the auxiliary delegation. The Emperor had never admitted weakness before. Ward's expression remained neutral. So what now? The Emperor met his gaze. You have forced us to acknowledge reality. That is not a small thing. He took a step forward. The auxiliary do not surrender, but we do not seek extinction, either. Ward studied him, and the Emperor's golden eyes gleamed. We wish to know what the future holds for us. Ward folded his arms. That depends. Will you still be conquerors, or will you change? The Emperor's claws flexed slightly. The air was heavy with tension. Then, finally, the Emperor gave the smallest nod. The age of conquest is over. The words felt alien coming from his mouth. The entire auxiliary delegation stiffened, but the Emperor did not waver. Ward watched him carefully. Then, slowly, he extended his hand. Then we can talk. For the first time in history, an auxiliary emperor shook the hand of another species. It was not surrender. It was the birth of something new. A fragile, uncertain peace. And for the first time in 10,000 years, the auxiliary did not see themselves as gods. They saw themselves as part of something greater. The Leviathan's thrusters roared to life, breaking free just as the flagship's final explosion shattered the night. On Earth, the people cheered. In the command center, Sarah sank into her seat, exhaling as the red enemy indicators vanished from the holographic map. Carter let out a heavy sigh. We won. But Sarah didn't smile. She just whispered, we survived. The Leviathan descended through Earth's atmosphere, battered but victorious. On the bridge, Elias sat on the floor, leaning back against the cold metal wall. His body ached. His mind raced. He had survived. But the war wasn't over. He glanced at Captain Cade, who smirked as he tossed Elias a water pack. Hell of a day, huh? Elias let out a tired chuckle. Yeah, he muttered, and I think it's just getting started. Above them, the last remnants of the Valorian fleet burned in the sky, and for the first time in history, Earth had made the galaxy afraid.